You're listening to the Valley Current.
Of course, I was preparing for trial as well in the case at the same time. My wife thought it was crazy. I would study maybe an hour or two a day. And she said, you know, are you taking this exam seriously? I said, yeah, I am. Look, I've got all the bar review stuff. So, yeah, I thought it was a hard exam. It's 2 days. And I got the notice just this week. I was like wondering if this is bad news, I'm going to cut my throat because I've taken a lot of other bar exams. I'm admitted in so many other places. And I got the news that says, congratulations. Of course, I should tell you the story of how hard it is to get the email to open because it's in a secure folder where you have to have like a special password. I couldn't remember the password. I couldn't remember my own password. So my wife was like, I think I got it written down somewhere for you. So she said she found it and I put it in. So there was like this trepidation of, I can't get the email open. I can't believe this. So it was like being a kid again. And you realize I was probably the oldest bar applicant and probably will be the oldest admittee in the state of Florida. It was like, to me, it was sort of a funny but milestone accomplishment, and it happened like literally. But let me just get the comparison of Florida on all those things. So Florida's got no state income tax. Florida gas seems low to me. It's like $2 and change a gallon. Last time I was in California, it seemed like it was $4 a gallon.
It's $4.50. Right?
Yeah, it seemed like a lot more money.
Right.
The sales tax is lower by a pretty big margin. Like I think the sales tax might be like 10% now in certain counties.
Right.
And I think it's like maybe 5%, maybe about half that. The cost of people, including lawyers and including paralegals, is like 1/3. A new associate at a big law firm in California is $200,000 a year to start.
Wow.
Here it may be like 60 or 70.
Really?
It's a big difference. And you know, if the person has come from a good law school and has passed the bar exam, they're probably just as good relative to what talent you would see in California. People might debate that, but you know, for my money, the bar exam tends to be kind of an equalizer. And if you pass it, you've sort of set a milestone of capability. So therefore, the cost of legal service is lower. The technical red tape seems to be lower from what I can see generally. And people seem to be sort of more positive about the future than what I keep hearing from people in California, which is we're not sure how we fix the number of problems that exist because there's so much political dissension. We cannot get a common leadership vision. How are we going to do this?
And the list that I was going through a little earlier, the two that we don't want to forget is the water shortage, the drought that and then let's face it, the other piece is the forest fires. You know, that on a big level causes so much damage across the board. These fires.
The air quality was so bad last year that, you know, there were so many clients of mine that were saying, look, I'm leaving and I think it's going to be for good. And they typically left for either Austin or for Nevada. Both tax-free states, but a little bit closer. Flight, you know, would be much shorter flight than a full East Coast.
I just don't know how much California could take. And I think that, I don't know if we're getting close to the boiling point, but I'll give you another example, Jack, and it's nothing like living it. Just like you know, you're so familiar with California, and then now you spend enough time in Florida, you can speak to that difference. Well, so the homeless problem is a really big problem in San Francisco. We all know this, right? So let me share this with the audience that for me, it was one of the biggest eye-openers that I can remember for the last couple of years. I just went up and visited Portland to do some salmon fishing on the Columbia River, and I hadn't been in downtown Portland for probably 10 years. And let me just say this without any exaggeration. I was concerned for my safety as a male walking around town in beautiful downtown Portland. I walked 20 minutes from the hotel to a brewery, and that time I was approached by 6 or 7 people that either wanted to sell drugs, buy drugs. Someone wanted to fight me for no reason. I'm just telling you, I don't know that people realize how bad Portland is right now.
I tried a case there about 5 years ago, and I thought it's a very clean city. And,
it was.
But it had a lot of what I would call punk rocking looking people, like people that seemed to be punk rockers, people that didn't seem to really necessarily be adding value to the city, like people that were, I don't want to say druggies, but they seemed to be some different culture, sort of a punk rock kind of culture. And then I did go, so I thought, okay, Portland's okay. And then I did go back a couple of years later, and I started to see images like the one I'll put up, where it seemed like a lot of tents and a lot of homeless people living on the street out of effectively a tent. And so you say to yourself, like, how are they, how are they going to the bathroom? Like, just talk about general public health and sanity, right? Hygiene. Like all these people that are in these tents, right, all along the city street, where do they go to the bathroom? Where do they shower? Like what, and this is a picture that's taken from August of 2020. So it's a little dated, but I think it's probably gotten worse.
I could tell you that it is, in my estimation, and I really don't think I'm exaggerating, somewhere between 8 to 10 times worse than San Francisco right now.
Okay, so that's a statement, because there are people that tell me about San Francisco. They walk out of their beautiful hotel and all of a sudden they're like in a series of tents, and it really annoys them. You're saying like 10 times worse, but really it's the common problem of cities that sort of attract this sort of level of people who think, well, if I get to the city, somehow I'm going to be able to, salvage cans and bottles and so much waste that comes out of the city. It's almost like another level of society that's feeding off of rich people, like feeding off of the richer people that are in the city. Same thing in New York City, right?
Yeah, the big difference with Portland, I think, the homeless is worse than San Francisco concentrated, believe me there. The second thing that I don't think San Francisco's got there yet, and I'm not sure that they will, let's hope that they don't, is that it's not uncommon every couple blocks, Jack, to see boarded up commercial buildings still with graffiti all over them. In other words, will those businesses ever come back?
You talked about Amazon, but arguably Amazon has decimated retail. And that was retail that previously existed because shoppers wanted to go in, wanted to try stuff on, wanted to see it, wanted to buy it at the point of purchase, and they weren't willing to go with Amazon. And now, because the pandemic has forced them to go to Amazon, and they've gotten used to it, and they've gotten used to the way the system works at the doorstep and so on, they're like, I don't need to visit that downtown area. I don't need to go to the shopping center. I don't need to go to any of these places. I don't need to find parking. I don't need to do this. I don't need to do that. So I think we're going to see that trend continue as more and more people say, I just don't need to have the hassle factor. I mean, I can tell you, this is a funny story, and you may think I'm getting old when I say it, but I was invited to be part of a panel, speaking engagement. And I was like, it's downtown Tampa, which isn't very far away. Let's call it 20 miles. I was like thinking, what's the traffic going to be like? And ultimately I just said, for what it's cost to park, I could take Uber and have an Uber drop me off and then take Uber back and not even move or park my car or worry about whether it's going to get broken into. Not that Tampa's that bad, but I thought to myself, last time I parked in a big city in San Francisco, my back window got shattered and a bunch of stuff was stolen out of the back seat. Not that any of it was valuable, but it was just hassle replacing the glass. So I was like, I'm just going to take Uber. By the time I'm done parking, it's probably going to be cheaper. just Ubering back and forth. And so it's like the same sort of thing. Is it a hassle factor to go out these days? Even if you've been invited to some event, which, I wanted to say yes, and I did it that way through Uber. But at some level, you could say people are not as willing to necessarily yonder from their computer screen. And that's what they do. They do everything just directly over the screen or their handheld. And they're getting used to doing it. So Amazon as a stock seems to me to be impossible for someone to catch up with them. Maybe Walmart will, but doesn't seem like it's in the cards.
Yeah. So I just think that, the next year or so, we'll see if there's a breaking point or a boiling point where there's a mass exodus. I think, if I'm not mistaken about this, I think this is accurate. For the first time in the last year, I believe this is true, more people have left than come in, and I'm not sure that's ever happened before in California.
Yeah, that's a new statistic for sure.
So that's one thing. The second thing is that it's very, very expensive for companies to do business. And now with the evidence of, this whole review of all kinds of commercial use and business use when it comes to the pandemic, that has opened the eyes of a lot of companies. So, it gives them an excuse, so to speak, to relocate or not have the presence they have in California. And I think that, the other big issue, I think, is just going to be the taxing. And I guess what I'm saying is, if we're having this discussion as we are today, or again, whether it was at a panel or you're looking out to the future, Jack, you can't honestly say, in the next 5 years, hey, the good news is California's got their act together and they're turning it around, and I could see lower taxes, lower gas prices, right? I mean, you can't say that.
I worry about this, Joe, and this is where I think we're in for a real shocker, and it's probably going to happen in the next 10 years, maybe even sooner. You're going to see a lot more middle management cuts as what I'll call robots, because that's what these AI-based systems are almost like, where automation is nearly robotic, whether it's physically represented by a robot or it's basically a robot that's doing the computation, analysis, recommendation, summarization, presentation, all the stuff that middle management does. We're going to see a tsunami of those robots. Just think of them as super advanced computers with super advanced software, take out so much of the middle class job market that people will have to flee what I'll call the higher cost states. Mm-hmm. They will be forced to say, I just can't afford to pay for the cost of living what it takes. And that may even be true beyond California. Like New York is a very expensive state. New York City is a very expensive city. Like you can go down the list, Illinois, Chicago, like you can just go down the list where there's a lot of middle management type jobs for a lot of different companies where automation is coming in. And years ago, we worried about, outsourcing to Mexico or outsourcing to Eastern Europe. It's not even that anymore. It's just pure automation replacement. And unless we as a society, and perhaps Biden as the president leads the effort, although I haven't seen them push this idea of, hey, we're going to provide free retraining. We're going to get people to learn programming. Like, there really aren't that many software programmers for the 300 million people in the United States. I'd be surprised if there's even 1% that are actually carrying out in the United States the software programming that drives our modern society. I think it's way less than 3 million people. I'd even say it might even be less than even 300,000 software professionals. Think of that. That's like 1/10 of 1% of the population of the United States is doing the software that's driving all this innovation. Those people are going to be paid a lot of money. But everyone that's otherwise wiped out by all that software, if they don't get retrained to somehow get those skills, and by the way, that even includes people that are lawyers being capable of driving the software, because a lot of the older lawyers, they don't want to touch a keyboard. They don't want to drive software. They want to pick up a phone. They want to pick up an old handset of a phone. Like, they don't even want to be on Zoom. And there's a number of them that don't even want to be on Zoom. They're like, give me your phone number. I just want to talk to you by phone. I don't want to do this Zoom stuff. Don't tell me about Zoom. Don't tell me that it works. I'm not interested in it. So there's going to be a big tsunami. It's coming, and it may hit faster than we realize. And all these other things you're mentioning that deal with the price of living will all be like a multiplicative effect on people that don't have the income to support anything. And then the question is, what state provides the ultimate downsizing rescue program? Like, where is that? And what does it become? And do people end up just retiring earlier because they just don't? Like, people laughed at me. Why are you taking a bar exam at your age? Like, someone said to me, are you crazy? And I was like, hey, I still think I have some vitality here. And it was a funny remark. It was like, you should be like getting ready to die. That's not the way I think of things. Hey, if you have parents that lived into your 90s, that's right. Thinking that you could live into your 90s, maybe you could do even better than that. When my dad's parting remark was, he had outlived his father by 18 years, so I should outlive him by 18. That would mean I have to get to 108, right? If you're using that scale.
There you go. Right? Yeah. Well, I think honestly, we all could learn a lesson that. Not only keeping physically fit, but to keep the mental stimuli going is even more important. Too many people think that retirement means, and I think that's probably an older generation thing, but I mean, now I don't think of retirement. I think of adjustments, slowing down, more control of my time, things like that. But the idea of not engaging with business-minded people or looking at opportunities or doing things that stimulate your mind and your growth. Well, I'm not sure that I stopped that.
Most people that have the ability to have a larger lifespan with a larger health span will have a larger work span, but they won't really treat it as work. They'll think of it more like, this is what I want to do, and I'm doing it with the people I like to do it with, and we're engaged socially. So you'll be on that fishing boat with people that are batting ideas around about new businesses, new investments, new something, and you're catching some fish along the way, and hopefully there's some restaurant that actually cooked it for you. Did you have a good meal while you were in Portland?
Oh my God, I had a lot of good meals, but I brought home 44 pounds of salmon fillets.
Wow, you're gonna freeze it all, or what are you doing?
I did. Freezing it all, already wrapped it up, froze it, and it's all.
The salmon, I understand, is shrinking in California. So you went out in Oregon, right? You went out on the ocean in Oregon. Where were you on a river?
The Columbia River.
Okay.
Yeah, that runs along there is beautiful. Yeah, that was a great part about that trip. But the eye opener was downtown Portland, and I guess the reason I was bringing that up is to relate it as our conversation about California. Where are we going with California? And I think I'm very concerned for the first time. I've been concerned for a while, but I would say my level of concern, if there's a meter or monitor, is going higher, because what I thought about when I saw Portland, I thought, how far are we away from cities that condone this behavior, like San Francisco and maybe San Jose and other? How far are we away from our cities becoming like downtown Portland? I don't know.
I think that San Francisco is right there, Joe.
Yeah,
San Francisco is right there. I don't think there's much of a difference, to be honest. I think it's just the question of, when does the density get to that level?
And so
we're going to see that. We're going to see the density at that level.
So it's an interesting debate. And for the people that listen to the podcast, and I'll do a little more of this next week, is that I know the first thing I hear a lot, which is an interesting debate, is that, Joe, the problem is there's no solution. And I would say, well, hold on a second. Why is it that they migrate to only certain cities? So why is it they stay away from certain cities and migrate to certain cities? That would be my first I would do some analysis and some studying around why did the mayor in Houston, for instance, almost eliminate it altogether because of the things he did. What he did? He made it uncomfortable for them. That was his strategy.
In Houston?
Yeah. There's a big story around that. They said it's almost a model that now cities are trying to study because they had a big problem, and he did away with 70-80% of it. And he said the biggest thing is it took some willpower and resources, but he just made it uncomfortable for them to set up camp.
Uncomfortable means he had the force of presumably the police and weren't enough activists to stop, sort of stop the, I would call it like bullying. Anyway, I wanted to show people, if we have a video version, there you are with a happy face with what looked like a 30-pound or maybe 40-pound. What was the biggest catch that you got there?
That right there is a 24-pound king salmon right there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But did you actually get any of it cooked while you were there, like literally right off the boat where you got some?
No, they filleted it. They cleaned it and filleted it for me right on the boat. But then I packed it in ice and shipped everything home, and now it's all in my chest freezer.
Wow, there you go. Yeah. So you actually had someone though that cut it up right on the boat. It looks like, right?
Yeah, that's part of the deal. They fillet it right there on the boat when you finish for the day. Yeah.
Nice. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
And they've got ice on the boat and everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you got a salmon dip. Oh, look at that. Now that's the pride and joy. So that's a sturgeon. It's kind of a prehistoric looking fish.
Right.
It's called a sturgeon. It's wonderful, wonderful eating. You could never get them. The only time you'd see them in a store, they're super expensive, and it's usually farmed. It's not fresh because they're extinct.
Wow.
They're endangered species, so they're careful of what you could keep.
How many people were on the boat with you?
Just me the first day only. The second day there was 3 of us, and the third day was 3 of us. The boats hold up to 6, and it gets more reasonable. I think next year it sounds like we'll have a full boat because of all the fun that.
You went out on your own one day.
Oh yeah.
Those are the pictures of you out on your own with some other boat captain that's driving the boat, and
the guide. Yeah, he takes us out, and it's all set up. And I'll tell you, this I want to share this story too, Jack, because we're talking about California, we're talking about longevity, and so the third day I'm fishing and I board the boat, and there's 2 other people that board the boat, a man that appeared to be about my age, and then his daughter. So we met, we start talking, engaging, having a nice conversation as we're moving out to the fishing area.
Right.
And so he's 58 years old. He's a pastor from Texas, and he's taking his daughter salmon fishing for the first time that he's always wanted to do. And why? Because he had brain cancer, 2 surgeries, and he only has about 16 to 18 months to live.
Wow.
So, very somber, very sad, but I have to say that he was very engaging. He was not feeling sorry for himself. His daughter was a really, really nice young lady. And the reason I share that story is all of us should be reminded that to do the best we can to live our life and, share some experiences, do some things you want to do, and live a little bit, because you just don't know, right? You just don't know.
One of the companies that I helped start like 16 years ago.
Wow.
16 years ago.
Boy.
They got acquired by Microsoft. It's in the news. It's all.
How exciting.
So it's exciting because I was right there at the start. I was actually the guy that came up with the company name. I was the guy that came up with the part of the vision. I helped them refine the vision. I kept a lot of the team together. I helped them hire key people. A lot of events over the 16 years. It's a great story. And so now they're all wealthy, like super wealthy, like really super wealthy. They're like, we don't know what to do with all this money. Like, we have no idea where do we park it? Where do we invest it? What do we do with it? I was like, man, you should just think about having fun. They're like, no, we got to do the next big thing. I was laughing because I said, well, you wouldn't understand this, but we're still in our 40s. A couple of them are in their 30s. They're like, you're a little different in your time frame, so you may be thinking differently. And the funny part, so this is a way to wrap back into the beginning, is some of them, I won't name names, but some of them are looking at buying $30-40 million properties in Northern California. There's not that many of those properties, Joe, but there are some.
Wow.
You get like the big view of San Francisco from Marin County. I won't identify the spot because I'm sure it's sensitive. And you get a lot of land, and you get like the equivalent of a hotel. It's not a hotel, but it's like your own family compound, right? And my question is, okay, so you're rich, you can buy that for cash, you can put all the servants in it because you have to have the full-time gardener, the full-time maintenance crew. Imagine all the full-time people you have to have, because it's probably like 50,000 square feet of buildings, 5 or 6 buildings. And my question is, how much property tax are you going to pay? Think about that, Joe. You buy a property. I'm just going to use round numbers. It may be smaller, it may be bigger. I don't know, $50 million property. Well, we know that that's going to be like $500,000 a year. Taxes. So if you have that property and you own it for 20 years, 30 years, I don't think the property taxes are going to get lower. They're probably only going to go higher based on all the problems we're identifying. How would you feel about, you have to make enough money every year or deplete your estate or deplete your investments by like $500,000 a year? Now, just suspend disbelief and stick with me. If you're a wealthy person and probably traveling around for business and doing, how many days are you actually spending in that home to justify that? If the year was a 500-day year, which it isn't, you're lucky probably if you're there even 250 days a year, but you're spending like $10,000 a day in property taxes for each day you're there, on top of, what about all the maintenance and all the people and all the services and all the plumbing and all the stuff, and the grocery bill and the utilities, like all the things that go to running that ship. And I was like trying to explain it that you can't just look at like the static snapshot cost. You got to look at like the operating costs, right? And then what's the joy that you get out of it? Because I was like, maybe you could like rent it from the guy that wants to sell it. Let him deal with the property taxes, because the property taxes are probably lower in his hands, right? Because he's probably had it for 20 years, so probably are tiny. Maybe lease it to you for 99 years. You know what I'm saying? I had a ball talking about this, because I was like, at some point you say to yourself, you can't just be working to pay taxes and maintenance and then you can't get out on the boat and have the fishing trip to enjoy the moment and talk about the one that got away. Right?
Yeah, not worth it. Although, I mean, it's just, I agree with you. When you try to assign logic to that, you want to say, who in the world, no matter the amount of money, right?
Well, it's like Mar-a-Lago. I'm sure Trump bought Mar-a-Lago and made it into a palace, and it's like its own little compound. And I guess his daughter has something like that now too, with Jared. Bought something in Florida that's like a $30 million or $40 million. And I mean, you could justify it saying it's always going to keep its value and maybe it's going to grow its value. But man, that is a lot for someone to imagine spending. Unless you're Bill Gates. I mean, if you're at that level, you can do whatever you want. You could buy a hotel chain for that matter and just go from hotel to hotel. But Joe, I do think that's kind of a point that what's happening in California, there's like the mega rich that can do unbelievable stuff. And then there's everyone else that's sort of like trying to grovel around. And if that continues at the level that it's been going since probably the year 2000, if not even before, there's probably inevitably going to be a civil war where people just feel like they don't just want to eat cake. They want some fairness, and they think the system is unfair. And I think the major differences I shared with some people the other day, when
in California, even versus San Diego, which I'm familiar with. I love San Diego. I visit there several times a year. Is that you could still, believe it or not, buy a decent home. Now you might have to travel 35, 45 minutes out of the general city of San Diego, but you could still buy a decent home for $400,000 or $500,000, a nice home. You're just going to be an hour, 45 minutes to an hour out of the city, but it's not like it's in, a poverty-driven area or slums, or it's just, so the difference in the Silicon Valley, as you know, Jack, it's very unique. If you can't, anywhere within, my gosh, now even 2 hours, maybe you could argue, maybe an hour and a half, you're talking Stockton and Lodi and places like that. You could, but even if you do that, it used to be someone would say, well, gee, I could, commute an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I could go buy this place for $400,000 or $500,000. Well, guess what? Now that same place where you're commuting 2 hours is now $700,000-800,000.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that's the problem. Even in Arizona and places like Nevada, see, the difference is you have your really affluent areas that are very expensive, but then you go outside those areas and there's so much land, you do have affordability in those, right? That, as you know, that does not exist in the Silicon Valley.
No, Silicon Valley has essentially been fully developed, and most of the manufacturing is gone. It's been replaced by either office buildings or residences. And there used to be the big Intel factories and the big AMD factories that made semiconductors and microprocessors. They're all outsourced outside the United States. And all those facilities have been mowed under and turned into office buildings or residences. That probably has hit the limit of the available real estate. I mean, I did see something recently I wanted to send to you because I was scratching my head as to where it could be. There was something that was for sale that said it was 116 acres, like a family compound, just outside San Jose with kind of a view of the city, sort of up in the hills. I'll see if I could find it and send it to you, because I was like, I couldn't even believe there's 116 acres left anywhere for sale that hasn't been developed. Like, it's like,
well, that's a difference. You could buy it, but you can't develop on it. That's the difference.
Yeah. So, Joe, it's good seeing you. I'm glad you caught all those fish. I have to make it back to California and visit and get to taste some of it. It sounds it's overdue.
We'll have to sit out in the backyard and have some wine and enjoy some salmon.
That's quite a motivator. I'll see when it can happen. So anyway, good seeing you, and we'll talk again. Thanks for being on the show.
Okay, take care, Jack.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.